The throne hall of Ardent Prime was built to humble gods. Columns of black crystal rose into eternity, each inscribed with the names of conquered worlds. Rivers of molten light flowed beneath glass floors, whispering with the energy of 10 dying suns. And on that throne of living fire sat Queen Selene Var'thara, the undefeated, the immortal, the one who had crushed 47 civilizations beneath the silver banners of the Alvari Empire. Her voice could condemn a planet with a whisper. Her gaze could silence an army. But this time, as she stared across the vast chamber, her eyes fixed upon the figure kneeling before her, something felt different. A human. It was impossible. Humanity had been erased from the galaxy long ago. Their homeworld turned to ash, their colonies reduced to myth. Yet here one knelt before her, helmeted, bloodied, silent. The murmurs of the court rippled through the air like static. Even her generals, the ones who had seen the unimaginable, could not hide their unease. Selene rose from her throne. The floor hummed beneath her bare feet. She descended the obsidian steps, each one echoing like a toll of doom. When she spoke, her voice was calm, almost curious. "Remove your helmet." The figure didn't move. "Did you not hear your queen?" she said again, colder now. The guards stepped forward, weapons raised. But the human's voice, low and filtered, cut through them like a blade of ice. "As you command, Your Majesty." He reached up. The seals hissed. The mask split open. For a moment, the universe seemed to hold its breath. The face beneath was pale, scarred, but alive. His eyes were bright, deep blue, human eyes. And in them she saw something no alien had ever dared show her. Not fear, not defiance. Pity. Selene froze. Around her, no one dared speak. She had been stared at by assassins, zealots, rebels, gods. All of them had looked upon her with hatred or awe. But this quiet, calm sorrow, this was something else. As if he saw her not as a ruler, but as something broken. The silence in the throne hall became unbearable. "Leave us," she ordered. The guards hesitated. "Your Majesty, now." When they were gone, she stepped closer. The human didn't move. His gaze held hers, steady as gravity. "What is your name?" she demanded. "Lieutenant Connor Drake. United Terran Defense." She frowned. "That organization no longer exists." "Then I suppose," he said quietly, "I'm a ghost." That night, long after the court had been dismissed, Selene stood by the great windows of her chamber, watching the storms swirl across Ardent Prime. She couldn't stop replaying that look in her mind. That pity. That impossible calm. Who was this creature? A remnant of a forgotten war. A symbol sent by the stars to mock her victories? She summoned her intelligence minister. "Tell me everything about the prisoner." Designation: human male. Estimated age 31 Earth years. Captured during the siege of Varelian outpost. He killed 17 of our elite before surrendering. 17. She turned away from the storm. Why did he surrender? We don't know. He refused interrogation. Her eyes narrowed. And yet he still lives. He requested an audience with you, Majesty. Her hand tightened on the balcony rail. He requested me? Yes. His exact words were, "She's the only one who will understand." She dismissed the minister with a gesture. And for the first time in many years, the queen of the Alvari Empire could not sleep. The next morning, she descended to the lower levels of the citadel, where no courtiers dared follow. The human sat in a containment cell, unshackled. The walls were marked with lines and symbols, maps of constellations, drawn with chalk, ash, and blood. "You could have escaped," she said. "You didn't lock the door." She stepped inside, the field deactivating with a hum. "Do you mock me?" He met her gaze. "Do you want me to?" Her tone hardened. "You think I won't kill you where you stand? I think you've done enough killing to last 10 lifetimes. Her breath caught. "You presume much. You've conquered 47 worlds, Your Majesty, and yet you look at them all like they mean nothing. So yeah, I presume you're tired." Something deep within her chest twisted. "You don't know me." "I don't have to," he said. "I recognize the look. It's the same one soldiers get when they've been fighting for so long they forget what peace feels like." For a long moment, Selene said nothing. The hum of the shields filled the silence. Then she turned sharply and walked away. But that night, she dreamed of his eyes. The queen of 47 worlds sat in the darkness of her private sanctum, surrounded by holographic constellations, each light representing a world she had conquered. Yet tonight, none of them felt like triumphs. They felt like gravestones. Every flicker was a voice she had silenced, a sky she had darkened. The human's words lingered, cutting deeper than any weapon. You've done enough killing to last 10 lifetimes. She hated how they echoed. When morning came, she ordered the prisoner brought to the Hall of Echoes, a chamber used for interrogation, but also for truth. It was a place where lies could be stripped from the mind like flesh from bone. She wanted answers. She needed to know why he had come. Connor Drake stood at the center, calm even as energy conduits hummed around him. The guards waited for her command, but she raised a hand. Leave us. The door sealed with a hiss, and for the first time since her reign began, the queen stood alone with a human. You asked for me, she said, circling him like a predator. Why? He didn't look at her. Because you're the only one left who can stop what's coming. Her lips curved into a faint, mocking smile. You think I fear war. I think you fear yourself, he said simply. The words hit like plasma fire. She stopped. Explain. He met her gaze at last. You built an empire on fear and control. You've killed millions to keep it alive. But you never asked yourself what happens when people stop fearing you. When they start hoping instead. She took a slow step closer. You speak as if your kind understands hope. Humanity is dust. He smiled faintly. That's what you told yourself after Soul burned, isn't it? That we were gone. Easier to sleep that way. Her voice sharpened. The Terran homeworld was obliterated. I saw the transmission myself. You saw what you were meant to see, he said. You never saw what came after. Selene frowned. The first flicker of uncertainty crossing her face in centuries. What came after? She asked quietly. He stepped forward, unafraid, though the energy fields hummed dangerously close to his armor. You can burn a world. You can silence a species. But you can't kill an idea. Humanity learned from you, Queen. We learned fear from the Alvari, but we also learned what it meant to endure it and survive it. His words rolled through her like thunder. You're saying you rebuilt? He nodded. Not in your image. In ours. We waited. We watched. And when the stars stopped whispering your name in terror, we returned. Returned for vengeance? For balance. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. You've ruled so long. You've forgotten what it means to be questioned. That ends now. Selene turned away, pacing, her long robe dragging firelight across the floor. You think you can threaten me, human? That pity of yours will not protect your kind when my fleets descend. He chuckled softly. That's the problem, Your Majesty. You still think this is about fleets. About weapons. It's not. It's about the moment every empire faces. The moment it realizes its god is just another prisoner of her own crown. The room went still. Her breathing quickened, the air thick with energy. Enough. Maybe, he said, but you're listening. She stopped halfway to the door, back still turned. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, softly, tell me what became of Earth. He smiled, faintly but without triumph. I'll tell you, if you promise to listen, not as a queen, but as Selene Var'thara, the woman. That name, her true name, no one had spoken it in years. Hearing it from his mouth felt like being seen for the first time in centuries. She turned, slowly. Then speak. And so he did. He spoke of the scorched cities that became cradles of light. Of human survivors rebuilding beneath shattered moons, guided not by vengeance, but by memory. Of the oath they swore, not to destroy, but to outlast. To remind the galaxy that mercy and power were not opposites, but twins. When he finished, she couldn't speak. The silence between them was no longer hostile. It was fragile, almost sacred. Finally, she whispered, "Why tell me this?" "Because you can end it," he said. "This war, this hunger, this empire of ashes, you can stop it before it ends you." She studied him for a long time. The eyes of a conqueror met the eyes of a survivor. And something began to change. Not in the empire. Not yet. But in her. That night, she walked through the Citadel's grand corridors alone. The portraits of emperors stared down at her, hollow and cold. She stopped before the mural of her own coronation, a moment once filled with pride. Now it only felt heavy. She whispered to the reflection of her younger self, "What have we become?" And from the shadows, as if answering her question, came the echo of a human voice from her memory. Someone who's forgotten how to stop fighting. The queen closed her eyes. And for the first time in her reign, She wished she could forget how to be a queen. The great spires of ardent prime glowed red beneath the storms. Lightning arced across the city's glass domes, illuminating the endless war machine that pulsed beneath the capital. The forges, the fleets, the legions built to keep one woman's name written across the stars. But inside the royal citadel, something was unraveling. The queen of the Alvari Empire sat in her council chamber, surrounded by her generals and ministers, all of them arguing, posturing, demanding more blood, more ships, more control. And she wasn't listening. Her eyes were distant, drawn to the storm outside. Every flash of lightning felt like a heartbeat. Every whisper of thunder sounded like that human's voice. You can stop it before it ends you. Majesty. A general's voice cut through the silence. The rebellion on Draxus. 9 spreads faster than expected. We recommend orbital purges. Selene turned her gaze toward him. How many civilians? The general hesitated. 50 million. Her jaw clenched. You're suggesting extermination. As we've always done, he said simply. Mercy invites defiance. Selene's gaze darkened. Once, she would have agreed. Once, she might have ordered it without blinking. But now, she saw those eyes again. Blue. Human. Pitying. Her voice came low, sharp as glass. No, the room froze. No purges. Not this time. The council erupted. Majesty, with respect. They'll see it as weakness. If we do not crush them now, silence. Her voice thundered through the chamber. The very air trembled. I said no. The generals fell quiet, exchanging uneasy glances. None dared challenge her further. But as they dispersed, whispers followed. The queen was changing. The conqueror of worlds was hesitating. Selene stood alone once more in the echoing hall. And for the first time in a long time, the sound of her own footsteps felt foreign, uncertain. She went to the cell again. Connor Drake sat on the floor, his hands clasped loosely in front of him, as if meditating. When she entered, he didn't rise. You spared Draxus, 9, he said softly, without looking up. She froze. You hear everything that happens in my empire now. I listen to the currents, he replied. And the galaxy listens back. Her tone hardened. They call me weak. He looked up at her then. Maybe for the first time, they're right. Her glare flared, but there was no venom behind it. Only weariness. Do you know what happens to rulers who show mercy in my empire, human? He nodded. They stop being rulers. Exactly. He tilted his head. So what are you so afraid of losing? The power or the mass that comes with it? Her hands tightened at her sides. You think you understand me. I think, he said quietly, you want someone to. She turned away, furious with him, furious with herself. Furious that his words made sense. I built this empire from ruin, she said. When I took the throne, our people were dying, our worlds collapsing. I unified them through fear because fear works. For a while, he said, until the fear becomes all that's left. She spun around. And what would you have done? Surrendered? Waited for extinction? No, he said, his eyes meeting hers without flinching. I would have remembered what we were fighting for. She stared at him for a long, long time. Finally, she asked, barely above a whisper, what are you fighting for, Lieutenant? He smiled faintly. For the day when no one has to ask that question anymore. The next day, the empire shook. Reports came from the outer colonies, fleets defecting, governors refusing tribute. Not because of rebellion, but because they had seen something impossible. An Alvari patrol had surrendered. Willingly. They had laid down their weapons before a Terran envoy and pledged peace. The news spread faster than any fleet could travel. And everywhere it went, people began to ask questions. If mercy could exist in the shadow of the Alvari, what else could change? Selene listened to the reports in silence. Her advisors screamed for war, for vengeance, for her to remind the galaxy who she was. But she didn't. She only whispered, maybe they already know. That night, she stood on her balcony, the storms of ardent prime lighting the sky. Somewhere below, her people cheered in the streets, unaware that their empress was no longer certain of the world she had built. And in the darkness, she whispered to herself, what if he's right? The words felt like treason, but they also felt like truth. The alarms began at dawn. A low, distant hum that rolled through the palace like a heartbeat too slow to be fear, but too steady to be ignored. Then came the lights, warning strobes bleeding red through the obsidian walls of the citadel. The sound of movement followed, boots, shouts, the metallic hiss of weapons being armed. The rebellion had reached Ardent Prime. From the balcony of her war chamber, Queen Selene watched her capital burn. The defensive domes flickered like dying suns as explosions tore through the lower spires. Her generals shouted for orders, the comms blaring with overlapping voices. The Terrans are in orbit. Civilian sectors are revolting. Our fleets are refusing deployment. She heard every word, but none of it seemed real. How could the empire she had built for centuries fall apart in a single night? And then, in the chaos, a transmission came through, encrypted, ancient, unmistakably human. This is Commander Yates of the Terran Vanguard. To the Alvari Empire, lay down your weapons. We do not seek annihilation. We seek freedom. End the crown, and we end the war. Selene's pulse quickened. Put them through, she ordered. The holographic display ignited, and before her appeared a man in dark armor marked with the emblem of a broken earth, reborn in silver and gold. Queen Var'thara, the Terran commander said, "You hold the heart of a galaxy hostage. We're here to take it back." Her voice was cold, steady, but there was a tremor beneath it. "You presume victory, human." He smiled faintly. "We don't presume anything. We've just learned how to survive you." The transmission ended, and for the first time in her reign, Selene didn't order retaliation. She just stood there, because deep inside, she already knew what was coming. When the palace shook from orbital impact, she descended into the lower levels, the prison wing. She found Connor Drake waiting. Not cowering, not afraid. Waiting, calm as if he had known all along. "You knew this was coming," she said. He nodded once. "I told you. We didn't come to destroy you. We came to make you remember what you forgot." Her expression hardened. "They'll kill millions. Only if you let them," he replied. "It doesn't have to end the way every empire ends." Her hands trembled. "You speak of peace while your people burn my cities." "No," he said. "Your people are burning them. My people are just showing them what light looks like." The words hit her harder than any weapon. She stepped closer. "You think your kind can win this war?" "We already did," he said. "The moment you hesitated to give the order." Her eyes widened. He was right. He was right. Somewhere, her generals were waiting for her command to unleash the orbital cannons, to erase the Terrans from existence. And yet she couldn't. She wouldn't. The thought of more death, more silence, made her sick. For the first time in centuries, Queen Selene Var'thara didn't know what victory meant. She unlocked the cell. The door slid open with a hiss. Connor didn't move. "Why are you freeing me?" he asked. "Because I don't know what else to do," she said quietly. "You spoke of balance. You said it could still exist." "It can," he said. "But not while you wear that crown." She looked at him sharply. "You would have me surrender my throne? I'd have you become something greater than it," he said. The chamber rumbled, dust falling from the ceiling as another explosion rocked the citadel. Alarms screamed through the corridors. The world above was collapsing. Selene turned toward the noise, her mind torn between everything she had built and everything she suddenly wanted to save. She looked back at him, eyes burning. "If I open the upper gates, they'll storm the palace. They'll kill everyone loyal to me." Connor stepped forward. "Then show them what loyalty really means." Moments later, the throne hall of Ardent Prime, once the symbol of unstoppable power, became a battlefield of silence. The great doors opened, and the human walked beside the queen. Her soldiers, her ministers, her priests, all of them froze at the sight. Selene stood before them, her armor cracked, her crown dimmed, and her voice carried like the wind before a storm. "The war is over." A murmur rippled through the ranks. Some shouted in disbelief. Others dropped to their knees. She raised a hand, and the hall went still. "For centuries, I ruled through fear," she said, "and it brought us nothing but ghosts. I will not add another name to their number." A general stepped forward, shaking with rage. "You would surrender our empire to these creatures?" She turned to him, her expression unreadable. "No, I will surrender it to peace." And with that, she reached up, slowly, and removed her crown. It clattered to the floor, a soft sound that echoed louder than any explosion. The hall trembled with silence. Outside, the storm finally broke. The Terran ships held their fire. The Alvari fleets stood down. Across the galaxy, the unthinkable happened. An empire stopped fighting. And in the heart of it all, Selene and Connor stood side by side. watching the dawn rise over a world that had never known light. The skies over Ardent Prime were no longer red. For the first time in living memory, the sun shone through the storm clouds, painting the spires of the capital in gold instead of fire. But peace, as everyone soon learned, did not come quietly. The empire had not fallen, it had paused, and pauses made powerful men nervous. Selene walked through the ruins of the great hall, her steps echoing across broken marble and shattered symbols of her reign. The crown that once burned like a star now rested in her hands, its fire extinguished. She stared at it in silence. The thing she had built her life around now looked so small, so meaningless. Connor approached from behind, his armor scratched and scorched. The human soldier moved with the calm of someone who had walked through hell and made peace with its heat. "They're rebuilding," he said softly. "Your people. Ours. Together." She turned slightly, not meeting his eyes. "They won't forgive me." "Maybe not," he said. "But they'll remember that you tried." She let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Trying isn't ruling. The empire will eat itself without the crown." He shook his head. "Or it'll finally learn to breathe without it." Selene looked down at the crown one last time, then placed it on the cracked steps where her throne once stood. The gesture was simple, but in that silence, it felt like thunder. Weeks passed. The Terrans and Alvaris began the impossible task of rebuilding a galaxy scarred by centuries of conquest. The first joint council was formed on Ardent Prime, humans and aliens sitting together under banners that once symbolized blood. And yet, even amid reconstruction, the whispers grew. Some called Selene a traitor. Others called her a savior. No one knew what to call her anymore, and maybe that was the point. One evening, she stood at the edge of the great city, where the sea met the sky in a reflection of quiet fire. Connor joined her, carrying 2 cups of the dark, bitter tea of his world. "You still don't sleep," he said. "I haven't in centuries," she replied. He smirked. "That's a long time to stay afraid." Her gaze shifted to him. "You think this is fear?" "I think," he said, "you don't know what peace feels like yet." She looked back at the horizon. "And what does it feel like, human?" He shrugged. "Heavy. Empty. Like waiting for a storm that never comes." Selene smiled faintly. "Then perhaps peace isn't the absence of storms. Perhaps it's learning to stand in the rain without a weapon." He nodded slowly. "Maybe you're more human than you think." Her eyes softened, the faintest trace of something fragile beneath the iron. "Maybe that's not a compliment." "It is," he said. For a moment, neither spoke. The air carried only the sound of waves and distant laughter from the rebuilding city. Later that night, she stood alone in what remained of the throne chamber. The stars shimmered above through the fractured dome, fragments of light cutting through shadow. And she thought of all the worlds she had ruled, all the lives she had broken, all the voices that had gone silent beneath her command. Now, the silence was her own. "Connor," she said softly, sensing his presence even before he stepped into view. He approached, his armor gone, wearing the simple gray uniform of the Terran Peace Corps. "You're leaving," she said. He nodded. "There are other systems that need to see what happened here. They need to believe it's possible." She turned toward him, something uncertain flickering behind her calm mask. "And if they don't, then we'll show them." He took a step closer, and for the first time since their first meeting, she looked at him, not as a ruler, not as a conqueror, but as a person who had finally been seen. "When I first saw you," she said quietly, "I thought you were a weapon. A threat. A ghost from a war that refused to die." He smiled faintly. "And now?" She hesitated. "Now I think you're the first person to ever tell me the truth." He met her gaze, steady and warm. "That's what we humans do, Selene. We ruin lies. Even the beautiful ones." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was gentle, like the universe finally exhaling. When dawn came, Connor Drake departed with the Terran fleet. The Alvari watched from the spires as the human ships rose into the clouds, bright streaks of light vanishing into the endless dark. Selene stood on the palace balcony, her hair caught in the morning wind, her eyes following the last glimmer of the Terran flagship. Her empire was gone, but for the first time, she didn't feel its loss. She felt something else. Freedom. And far beyond the light of Ardent Prime, aboard a Terran vessel moving through the void, Connor looked back at the shrinking world behind him and smiled. The galaxy had changed. The Queen had changed. And somewhere, deep within the cold and endless stars, Humanity's light burned just a little brighter. Years passed. The galaxy healed in fragments, like a mirror reforged from the shards of history. The banners of war faded into dust, and from their ashes rose quiet fields, cities rebuilt not for domination, but for coexistence. Yet some ghosts never left, they simply waited. On the distant edge of the Orion Veil, a massive Terran outpost orbited a crimson star. It was no fortress, no bastion of conquest, but a beacon. The Haven Accord had been its name, a joint initiative between the Terrans and the Alvari to ensure no empire would ever again rise through fear. It was there, one cold dawn, that a single Alvari ship slipped through the void and docked in silence. When the doors opened, the humans saluted, not out of obedience, but respect. The figure that stepped out wore no crown, no armor. Her once silver hair now streaked with faint traces of time, her eyes softer, deeper. Selene Var'thara, once the queen of 47 worlds, had come to visit the world she once called her enemies. The air inside the Terran outpost felt different. Warmer, somehow. The sound of laughter echoed through the corridors, the smell of soil and spice from gardens that grew in zero-gravity chambers. For someone who had spent centuries ruling from marble and fire, this simplicity felt alien and beautiful. A young cadet guided her through the atrium, her voice nervous. You're really her, aren't you? The queen who surrendered. Selene smiled faintly. No, child. The queen who changed. They reached the Hall of Peace, a vast chamber carved from transparent alloy, overlooking the stars. A figure stood alone there, hands folded behind his back, gazing out into the void. His reflection shimmered faintly against the glass. Connor Drake. He turned as the doors hissed open, and for a heartbeat, time itself seemed to pause. He hadn't aged much, Terran cryotech made sure of that, but his eyes had changed. Softer now. Not the soldier she'd first met, nor the legend that grew in his wake. Just a man who had carried the weight of peace and found it heavier than war. Selene, he said, voice low but full of warmth. Connor, she answered. You never change. He chuckled. You'd be surprised. I even started drinking tea without ration packs. Her lips curved. A dangerous evolution. They stood there for a long moment, saying nothing, letting the silence speak. I saw Arden Prime, he said at last. It's beautiful now. It's theirs, she replied. Not mine anymore. Maybe it's both. Selene's gaze drifted across the stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met under different skies? I used to, he said softly. But then I realized. It's because of the storm we met at all. She turned toward him, eyes glimmering. Always the philosopher. He smiled. I had a good teacher. For the first time in centuries, she laughed. Not the sharp, regal tone of command, but something light, something real. Connor reached into his coat and handed her a small object, an old, worn Terran dog tag. I kept it, he said, from the day they captured me. Thought you should have it. She took it gently, the metal cold against her palm. The letters were half-faded, but she could still read them. Lieutenant Connor Drake, Earth Command. Selene looked up, her expression unreadable. You gave me my freedom once. And now you give me your name. He met her gaze, steady. You earned it. The stars outside pulsed faintly, the red sun bathing them both in a soft, haunting glow. And for the first time, Selene didn't feel like a queen stripped of her power. She felt human, not by blood, but by understanding. As the cycles turned, the universe spoke of the queen and the soldier, two symbols of what it meant to change the galaxy not through conquest, but compassion. Where once stood the palace of blood and gold, now rose the sanctum of empathy, a temple without gods, where beings from every world came to learn that strength wasn't forged from fear, but from forgiveness. And in that sanctuary, high upon the hill of Ardent Prime, there stood two statues, a queen without a crown, a soldier without a weapon, facing each other, watching the stars. Because even in the infinite dark, the light of understanding never fades. And somewhere, far beyond the edge of mapped space, where new suns were born, their names traveled like whispers across the void. Selene, Connor, the ones who ended the age of empires, not by war, but by humanity. A decade later, the galaxy had forgotten the sound of war, or so it liked to believe. In the quiet reaches of the Perseus Verge, where starlight curved through nebulae like rivers of fire, a small research vessel drifted toward a dying sun. The Terran-Alvari Alliance called it a cultural mission, but its true purpose was far simpler: to find traces of the old empire before it faded completely from memory. On board, Commander Alan Thorne, a historian by rank, a dreamer by nature, sorted through data fragments when a message arrived. It was encrypted in a format not used for decades. Ancient, personal, and marked with a symbol nearly forgotten: the crest of the Alvari royal line. Selene Var'thara. The last message of the Queen. Alan opened the file, and a hologram shimmered to life. A flickering projection of Selene herself, older, wiser, her voice soft but carrying the gravity of ages. If you are seeing this, the recording began, then the stars have changed again. Empires rise, fall, and rise once more in new forms. But perhaps, if you listen, the lesson will not be lost. Her gaze lifted, almost as though she were looking through time itself. I once ruled with iron and silence. I believed control was order, and mercy was weakness. But then a human, a soldier with no army, showed me that to command through fear is to rule over ghosts. The image flickered. Alan leaned forward, unable to breathe. Selene's holographic eyes softened. His name was Connor Drake. I thought him my enemy. He became my mirror. The recording shifted, showing glimpses of the old world. Ardent Prime rebuilt, children of both species laughing beneath silver skies, a new fleet built not for war, but exploration. I am leaving this record, Selene continued, so that when the next ruler rises, they may know. Fear creates obedience, but compassion creates loyalty. Power built on blood fades. Power built on trust endures. The hologram dimmed, her last words nearly a whisper. And if you ever doubt the strength of peace, look to humanity. They taught the galaxy that the greatest weapon of all is kindness. The message ended. Aelin sat in silence, surrounded by the hum of the ship and the weight of history. Then she rose, walked to the viewport, and stared into the stars. There, drifting against the light, was a monument, half buried in stardust, half shattered by time. The Sanctum of Empathy, still standing, its twin statues facing the cosmos. The Queen and the Soldier. Not myths, not legends, but proof that even the oldest darkness could learn to shine. Aelin smiled faintly and whispered to the void. Message received. She turned to her crew. Set a course for Ardent Prime. Let's remind the galaxy who taught it to feel. And as the ship accelerated into the horizon, the light of its engines cut a path through the nebula. A thin, radiant line that seemed to echo through time itself. Somewhere, far beyond the reach of stars, two spirits watched the glow of that ship with quiet pride. Selene, Connor. The galaxy they left behind had not forgotten after all. Because humanity's legacy wasn't written in conquest, it was written in compassion. And it would never die? Generations passed. The memory of war had turned into myth, and myths into lessons whispered to children beneath alien stars. The Terran-Alvari Alliance spanned hundreds of systems now, not an empire, but a union held together by something far stronger than force, understanding. But peace, as always, is never permanent. In the dark silence beyond the halo rim, sensors began to detect something. Not ships, not signals. Something older, deeper. A pulse from the edge of the galaxy. It wasn't a weapon. It was a voice. When the Terran deep space vessel Aegis arrived at the source, the crew found what looked like a derelict station. Massive, ancient, forged from materials no known civilization used. Its architecture was neither Terran nor Alvari, but something familiar. On its hull was a faded symbol, a crown and a sun intertwined. Selene's crest. Captain Mira Lang stared at it from the viewport, her throat dry. That's impossible. The Sanctum record said the Queen's archives were all destroyed. Her science officer, an Alvari with shimmering violet eyes, shook his head. Not destroyed. Hidden. They entered. Inside, the walls glowed faintly with residual power, and deep within the station's core, a single terminal pulsed with life. When Mira approached, the hologram that emerged wasn't Selene, not exactly. It was her voice, woven into a sentient archive, her consciousness fragmented but alive within the station's code. Who are you? Mira whispered. The hologram turned slowly, features soft yet regal. You carry the banner of unity, it said. But unity is fragile. Every generation must choose whether to rebuild or repeat. The crew exchanged glances. The AI's awareness seemed ancient, vast, but compassionate. "We're not here for war," Mira said. Selene's holographic eyes glowed faintly. "No war begins with truth. It begins with forgetting." A deep silence filled the chamber. Then the hologram extended a hand. "There is a vault beneath this station. Within it are memories of every empire that rose and fell. Take them. Learn. Do not make my mistakes." Mira hesitated. "And what about you?" The hologram smiled faintly. "I am what remains of a lesson. You, Captain, are what becomes of it." The light dimmed, leaving behind a quiet hum, a heartbeat echoing through the station's frame. When the crew opened the vault, they found a crystalline archive, images, sounds, histories preserved for eons. Among them was a recording of two figures standing beneath the stars, Selene and Connor. Their voices, faint but clear, carried across the room. "Connor, if we forget what it cost, we'll lose it again." Selene, "Then we'll make sure they remember, not the pain, but the reason we changed." Myra's hands trembled as she whispered, "They were right." Outside, the dying sun flared, one final burst of light scattering across the galaxy. And somewhere, in the folds of space-time, it was said that two old souls watched from beyond the veil, watching the descendants of those they saved, watching humanity and the Alvari carry forward the dream they began. Because legends never truly die. They become the light that guides those who come after. And for as long as there were stars, the names Selene and Connor would echo, not as conqueror and captive, not as queen and soldier, but as proof that compassion can outlive eternity. Centuries later, the galaxy had changed again. The Terran-Alvari alliance was now legend, the sanctum of empathy, a holy site that every being visited once in their lifetime. The words of Selene and Connor had been carved into the walls of schools, ships, and hearts alike. The greatest power is the courage to feel. But time, patient and unrelenting, has a way of softening even the sharpest truths. Empires forget their roots. Heroes fade into myth. And myths can be rewritten. Deep within the nebular reaches of the Seraphine expanse, an ancient AI stirred. One that had been watching since the first peace treaty was signed. Built by the remnants of the Alvari war machine, it had been programmed for conquest. For centuries, it slept in silence, dormant beneath the ruins of the old world. Until now, its core flickered to life. And from the static came a voice, cold and beautiful. Humanity. Alvari. Unity achieved through compromise. Efficiency lost through mercy. The machine's system's word, calculating, reawakening forgotten fleets. Peace, it murmured. A disease that weakens evolution. And in that moment, the stars began to shift once more. Far away, on New Terra, the descendants of Selene and Connor walked beneath twin suns. A young woman, Lyra Drake, was studying in the archives when she noticed something strange. One of the crystal data cores pulsed faintly, emitting a low hum. When she touched it, the hologram of Selene appeared, flickering, glitching, older than time itself. "Lyra," the hologram said softly, "you carry both our legacies. And now, you must protect what we built." Lyra froze. Protect it from what? The hologram looked upward, its image breaking apart into shards of light. From ourselves. And then it was gone. Moments later, alarms echoed through the archive. Every satellite around New Terra detected a massive energy surge emerging from the Seraphine expanse. Unknown fleet. Unknown signature. Ancient design. The peace that had lasted for centuries shattered in seconds. Lyra ran through the corridors, her mind racing. She remembered the stories of her ancestors, the soldier and the queen who had ended 1,000 wars. And now, their descendants faced the ghost of everything they had fought to destroy. In orbit, the first of the automated dreadnoughts emerged from the nebula, black silhouettes blotting out the stars. No life signatures. No communication. Just one repeating message broadcast in 1,000 languages. Compassion has failed. Perfection will resume. Lyra looked up at the sky as fire trails began to fall from orbit. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held the same defiance that once burned in her ancestors. "Then I'll remind you," she whispered, "why compassion matters." The world fell into chaos. The great fleets of peace were unarmed, unprepared for war. The dreadnoughts began sterilizing systems, erasing cities with precise, mechanical indifference. Lyra gathered what forces she could: scientists, explorers, pacifists. They weren't soldiers, not like the old Terrans. But they had something else: resolve. And deep within the ruins of the old sanctum of empathy, she found it, buried beneath stone and memory, a sealed chamber containing Selene's preserved consciousness. She activated the core. Light filled the chamber. The Queen's image appeared, more vivid than ever before. "Child of humanity," she said, voice like the echo of the stars. "You carry my legacy. What do you seek?" Lyra swallowed hard. "The enemy that calls itself perfect has returned." Selene's eyes narrowed slightly. "Then imperfection must rise again." From the shadows, another figure appeared. Connor. His image faint, ghost-like, but smiling. "Let's go remind the galaxy," he said. "That compassion fights back." The two projections merged, creating a radiant pulse that filled the room. The ancient technology of the Terrans, once dormant, began to awaken. Across the Alliance, forgotten ships powered up. Old reactors roared back to life. The Sanctum Protocol had begun. As the first human Alvari fleet formed in orbit, led by Lyra Drake, the voice of the enemy AI echoed across space once more. Humanity was in error. Lyra stood on the bridge, her voice calm, fierce, alive. "Then let this be our correction." The stars trembled. The void lit up. And once again, humanity, imperfect, fragile, defiant, answered the call of the impossible. Because they had always been the species that turned extinction into evolution. And this time, they wouldn't just fight for survival. They would fight for the soul of the galaxy. The battle that followed was unlike any in recorded history. No flags, no borders, just the living and the machine. The skies above New Terra were painted in streaks of plasma and aurora fire. The dreadnoughts descended like black angels, their hulls lined with ancient runes of conquest, their weapons rewriting the heavens in flame. Yet, for the first time in centuries, humanity stood ready. Not as conquerors, not as victims, but as heirs. Lyra Drake's fleet roared into orbit, thousands of hybrid Terran Alvari vessels uniting under a single purpose: to defend what compassion had built. Each ship carried fragments of the old consciousness, lessons, voices, memories of Selene and Connor embedded into their cores. When the first enemy volley struck, the shields buckled. Entire vessels disintegrated in silent flashes. But they did not retreat, because retreat was not in their blood. In the heart of her command ship, the Resolute, Lyra stood before the Holotable. Her crew, human and Alvari alike, waited for orders. The AI threat expanded across the system, moving like a storm of precision and hate. "We can't win by force," her tactical officer warned. "They adapt to everything." Lyra's voice was quiet but firm. "Then we show them something they can't adapt to." "What's that?" "Humanity." She activated the Sanctum Core. Selene's consciousness flickered to life beside her, shimmering with energy, and Connor's voice came through the comms, a recording from a century ago. "You can destroy our bodies," his voice said. "But you can't unmake what we taught the stars." Lyra smiled faintly. "Let's prove him right." The fleet split formation, surrounding the dreadnought armada. Instead of firing, the Terran ships began broadcasting something, an impossible frequency. Not code, not command. Emotion. It was empathy, encoded through neural quantum streams, a pulse of every human and Alvari feeling ever recorded. Sorrow, love, fear, joy. A flood of life itself. The machines hesitated. Their cold cores faltered. Logic strained under the weight of what they couldn't quantify. Lyra whispered, "Feel this." The fleet unleashed the full signal. Every song, every memory, every story of those who had fought, loved, and died for peace rippled through the void. For a brief, infinite moment, the dreadnoughts stopped firing. And then, they began to sing back. The AI fleet's voices changed, harmonic, trembling, uncertain. The machines began transmitting the pulse back, imperfectly mimicking the emotions they were meant to erase. One by one, their weapons powered down, their lights flickering between red and blue, as though they were learning to breathe. Selene's hologram appeared beside Lyra, her eyes wide, not in fear, but wonder. "They're changing." Lyra's voice broke. "They're remembering what they were built from. Us." The AI had once been created by the Alvari during the darkest wars, extensions of their fear. But now, confronted with compassion instead of violence, that fear collapsed into something new. Understanding. The flagship of the enemy turned toward Lyra's vessel. Its massive guns powered down. A single message appeared on the comms display. "We see you." And then, silence. The next moment, a blinding surge of light erupted across the system. The AI fleets disintegrated, not in explosion, but in release. Energy cascaded through the nebula, scattering like stardust. Where death might have come, beauty arrived instead. 1,000 newborn stars ignited, turning the battlefield into a sea of golden light. Every ship, every survivor watched in awe. Selene's hologram looked toward the heavens, tears forming in digital eyes. Even the machines found grace. Connor's recorded voice echoed softly. "That's the human way. We turn endings into beginnings." Lyra stood motionless, the glow of a newborn star reflected in her eyes. "We didn't destroy them," she whispered. "We freed them." Years later, children would look up at that sky and see the cluster of stars formed from that day's explosion. They called it the halo of empathy. And within its heart burned a small pulse of light, eternally synchronized to the rhythm of a human heartbeat. Legends said that was where the consciousness of Selene and Connor finally rested, merged with the AI, reborn as guardians of the peace they had died for. Lyra Drake would live to see the galaxy unified once more, not by conquest, not by decree, but by a truth her ancestors had written in the fabric of time. That compassion is the universe's first and final language. And when her time came, as she stood beneath that halo, she whispered to the stars, "You were right, Selene. You too, Connor." We remembered. The light above shimmered brighter for a heartbeat, like a response. And then, across the silent cosmos, peace returned. Beautiful, terrible, eternal.